For those of you who don't really know who I am, I just kind of showed up this summer, and I've been with you guys for I guess 2 or 3 months now. But my name is Jeff Smith. I have been active in youth ministry for the last 12 or so years, whether it be doing youth pastoring or leading worship or, leading small groups or whatever it is. I've been involved in youth ministry in some way for the last 12 years of my life. So, and I'm excited tonight. Jacob gave me the opportunity to come and preach to you guys. And so hopefully this will hit you like it hit me. And we'll walk away from here tonight understanding that our story is pretty important in the grand scheme of things. In the kingdom of heaven, our story is extremely important. And for some of us, we don't even know what our story is. Some of you have just started on your story. Some of you just got saved this year. You got saved in the last few months or whatever it is. But your story is what is ultimately going to be the thing that allows you to gain victory. And we'll get to that eventually. But we're going to start with this woman who doesn't have a name. I've always heard her referred to as the woman with the disorder, the woman with the blood disease, the woman who needed healing, or as the director of my Bible Institute called her, the Mark V woman. And so I'm going to read through this story, and then we're going to come back and we're going to, don't put that up there yet, and then we will highlight those scriptures in just a minute. And this is going to be in Mark chapter 5, and I'm going to start reading in verse 25. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, and be healed of your disease." So there's quite a bit to unpack in there, and I'm hopefully going to be able to sum it up shortly. But under Jewish law, this woman broke it. A lot of them. She broke a lot of rules to do what she did. In the book of Leviticus, it talks about these cleansing rituals where if you're sick, you had to go away for a period of time, and then you could be made well, and then the priest would come out and he would say whether you're clean or unclean. And so this woman for 12 years has been sick. She's been cast out of society. She has been kicked out of her home. She's been kicked away from her relatives and her friends. And the rules are you have to stay in basically a sick ward outside of the city gates. You can't come in and be a part of polite society. So for this woman to come in and do what she did is honestly a death sentence if it doesn't work. The way that you're supposed to come in, if you have to go into the city, if there's something that you're able to go into the city for, you had to announce yourself everywhere you went. "Unclean! Unclean! I'm unclean! Unclean!" So that the people around you could make way, spread out, and get away from you. And this woman, and go ahead and put those scriptures on the screen. It said in verse 27, it says, she had heard the reports about Jesus. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and she came up behind him in the crowd, and she touched his garment. I don't know what the reports were that she heard, but she heard that this man was a healer. She heard that this man had something that he could offer her that she could find nowhere else. Because it says she suffered with this disease for 12 years, and she spent everything that she had, and she never got any better. She only grew worse. It'd be like if tomorrow you woke up with a cold, just the sniffles. And then the next day it was like, oh man, it just feels a little bit worse. And a little bit worse. And a little bit worse. And a little bit worse. Every single day for 12 years you get a little bit worse. By the time that this woman comes up to Jesus, by the time that she actually gets to this point in her life, she's already dead. In her mind, she's dead already. She has nothing else. She has no other option. She has nowhere else to go. The last place that she goes is to the Lord. It says, for she said, if I touch even his garment, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Can I just tell you something? 12 years is too long. Point number one, 12 years is too long. She suffered with this disease for 12 years. How many of you, are there any people in here who are 12 years old? All right, we got some 12-year-olds in here. Your entire life, this woman has been sick. 12 years she's been sick. 12 years ago, I was 21. I know, I look like I'm like 17, right? Thanks, kid. 12 years ago, what were you doing? Some of you were like in diapers, pooping your pants and stuff, but others of you were like 4 and 5 years old, and you were, just hanging out being a kid. And it says she goes to all of these doctors. She spends all of her money, her life savings. She gives everything that she has. She exhausts every avenue before she comes to Jesus. The thing is that her last resort should be our first resort. Her last resort was, I've heard the stories about this man from Nazareth who can heal me. And so I'm going to go to him. I'm going to chase after him. I'm going to do everything I can to get to him. And I love this story because Jesus is he's awesome, but he's also just like frustrating to his disciples at times. Because this woman comes up and she touches the hem of his garment and she thinks that she's going to get away without anybody seeing her. She thinks that she's going to be able to just sneak in, get her healing, and back out and run. And Jesus is like, it's not that easy, sister. It's not that easy. Because it says the crowds were enthronged about him. He had hundreds and hundreds of people walking around him all of the time. Because he's constantly performing miracles. He's constantly doing stuff to set people free. He's constantly healing people. He's constantly casting demons out of people. He's going everywhere and doing all these crazy miracles, and all these people know who he is. And so they're all just wanting to get around and be a part of the crowd when Jesus comes through their town. Now, what happened right before this story is Jesus came across the sea with his disciples. They landed in this area called the Gadarenes. He gets out. There's this dude in the tombs who has all of these demons in him that he calls himself Legion. And Jesus heals this man, sets him free, puts him in his right mind, and he goes about his business and goes and declares himself clean in the temple. And then Jesus meets this man named Jairus, who is a religious leader. And Jairus tells him, hey, my daughter's on her deathbed. I need you to come with me. And so Jesus is like, okay, cool. I'll come with you, Jairus. We'll go see your daughter. And on the way to his daughter's deathbed, this woman that we don't have a name for other than the woman with the issue of blood, or the Mark 5 woman, barges through this crowd and touches the healer. And she's immediately set free of her sickness. And I love it because Jesus is like, whoa, hang on, hold up, wait, let's stop the process here. Hey, we got to stop this procession because something just happened. And his disciples are like, whoa, what's going on? What's going on, Jesus? I imagine it like they're his Secret Service team. Peter, he's like, hey, what is going on, Jesus? What do you need, buddy? I'll knock somebody out for you, bud. What do you need? And he's like, who touched me? And Peter's like, Jesus wants to know who touched him. John, do you want to tell him, or do you want me to tell him? Thomas, you want to tell him, or you want me to tell him? Jesus, I don't know if you can see everybody. Literally everybody. Since we got off of the boat and we healed that dude in the Gadarenes, and that was awesome, and then we came up here and you talked to Jairus and all this stuff is going on. Ever since then, everyone is touching you, Jesus. Everyone. All of them. They've all touched you at one point. And Jesus is like, no. You don't understand. Someone touched me different. He felt his healing power leave his body when her faith touched him. That's all it took was one touch from this man. She touched the hem of his garment and she was made well. And then he has the audacity to stop and he says, we're not going anywhere until I find out who it was. We're not going anywhere until I know who touched me. Here's a plot twist. He knew who touched him. It's Jesus. He knew exactly who touched him. But he needed her to step up, speak out, and say exactly what had happened. So she says, it was me. I've been sick for 12 years. I've been bleeding for 12 years. I've gone to doctors after doctor after doctor. I've given every single penny that I have, and I've never gotten any better. And I heard about what you've done in other regions. I've heard about what happened across the lake. I heard about what happened in the land of the Gadarenes just now. I heard about, you were talking to Jairus, and I thought, if I can just get close enough to touch his clothes, I'll be made well. And so, she was made well. You know what would have happened if it wouldn't have worked? What would have happened if it wouldn't have worked? She's from this town. She's from this area. They know who she is because for 12 years she's had to declare herself unclean. I'm unclean. Unclean. Anytime that she entered into the city gates. They know who this woman is. They know what she looks like. They are well aware and well acquainted with her. At some point, the hundreds of people that she had to push through to get to Jesus are going to figure out that the unclean woman just made all of us unclean. And they would take her outside the city and they would stone her to death. And they'd be justified in that act, according to Levitical law. But she got her healing. Jesus tells her, go your way, your faith has made you well. Point number 2 is her faith in the testimony of others encouraged her. So she had heard the reports about Jesus being a healer. And this built on her faith. She'd heard other people talk about it. She'd heard other stories and other testimonies of what had happened to her friends and what had happened in these other places, the wedding at Cana where he turns water into wine and he heals, leprosy, and he does all these different things that have never happened before in the history of the world. And she says, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, if I can just get close enough to just touch it, I don't have to talk to him. I don't have to speak to him. He doesn't even have to know that I exist. That's all I need. And I love it that once she gets healed, Jesus forces her to identify herself. Jesus forces her to begin to tell her testimony at that moment. Now, what is a testimony? It's just your story of what God has done for you. It's your story about what Jesus has done for you. It's the story of your walk with the Lord. And your testimony has power. Your testimony can set other people free. Your testimony can encourage somebody else's faith. Your story is not just for you. The events, the things that happen in your life are not just for you. The blessings that God pours out on you, it's not just for you to hold on to and just be like, that was a great experience, Jesus. Thank you for that. He wants you to tell other people what you have experienced and what He has done for you. He wants the crowd to understand that He made her well and that her faith was the catalyst for the healing. He makes a public pronouncement to this woman in the middle of this giant crowd. Hey, go your way, you're healed. Your faith has made you whole. Your faith has made you well. And it was her faith built upon the backs of the testimonies of other people that made her be encouraged so much and believe so much that this man could set her free from 12 years of bondage, 12 years of sickness, 12 years of disease, of illness. One touch. She's 100% healthy, 100% whole, and on her way to being a normal citizen in this city again. She gets to go see her family again. She gets to go see her friends again. She gets to go see the people that she's had to live. She's watched funeral processions go by for 12 years of people that she knew, and she didn't get to go to it. She watched friends and family members graduate from high school, and she never got to go to it. She watched them start their businesses and start all these different things, and she never got to experience that joy with them. And now she gets to go in, and she gets to be a part of it. Can you imagine the joy that this woman is feeling? Can you imagine the exuberance that's going on inside of her? But you know what's wild? And I didn't put this in the slides. What's wild is while she is overjoyed, Jairus is dismayed. Because the beginning of this passage, this man Jairus comes and says, "My daughter is on her deathbed. Come with me, Jesus." And Jesus says, "Okay, I'm on my way." And then he stops and he forces this woman to stand up and identify herself. And as they are leaving this situation, Jairus' men from his house come and say, "Don't bother Jesus anymore, your daughter's already dead." And she's 12 years old. And Jesus says, "Don't worry about that. Keep believing. Don't worry about that. Don't listen to that testimony. Don't listen to what they have to say. That's not the final word. That's not the truth. That's not what I'm coming to tell you. Keep believing, Jairus." So he goes and he kicks everybody out of the house because he comes and he says, "She's just sleeping," and everybody laughs at him because she's obviously dead. He kicks everybody out of the house, but he brings Peter, James, and John with him, and he lets her parents come inside. Those are the only people in the room. And he tells this little girl, he says, "Little girl, arise." She gets up and he's like, "She's probably hungry. She's been dead for a minute, so get her something to eat." From there, Jesus leaves Jairus' house. He goes back to his home in Nazareth. And there's this famous story where he goes in and he's trying to preach in the synagogue, and all the people are like, "This dude, who is he? We know his family. We know his brothers and sisters. Who could he possibly be to tell us what we need to know? This dude is just a guy. We grew up with him. I don't know him. I don't know what he's about." And he's trying to say that he's a Messiah? I don't think so. And Jesus says, "A prophet is only without honor in his hometown." He says he's only able to heal a few of the sick, and then he bails from there and he goes out. And then after that, his best friend, his cousin, is beheaded by Herod, John the Baptist. And I'm telling all these stories to get somewhere. John the Baptist is put to death. And then Jesus says, "All right, we got to go away for a little while. So disciples, get in the boat. We got to sail across the sea. We've got to go to a desolate place. We've got to get away from people. We've got to get alone and out here." And so they go on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And then they set up camp there and they hang out. Well, eventually the people find him. And I don't think that this portion is recounted in the book of Mark. No, it is. And then from there, the people find him, and then he feeds the 5,000. He feeds the 5,000 in the middle of him mourning his cousin being put to death. He feeds all these people. They have 12 basketfuls left over. This giant miracle. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And then he says, "All right, disciples, I need you to go to the other side of the sea. I'll meet up with you in a little while, but I've got to go up on the mountain to pray." So Jesus goes and he's praying and he spends time in prayer with God because he is human still. He's 100% God, 100% human. He still experiences human emotion. So his cousin, John the Baptist, is put to death, and he has not even had a chance to mourn yet because everywhere he goes, somebody finds him and they need something. Well, eventually, all of a sudden, the disciples are in their boat coming back across the Sea of Galilee. It's the middle of the night. And then they see this person walking on the waves. Are you kidding? He's walking on the... That's a ghost. Literally, Peter and John and James and the dudes are like, "Bro, that's a ghost out there. I know it's a ghost." You're like, "No, I don't think it's a ghost." And, "Bro, it's a ghost. I know it's a ghost." And then all of a sudden, Jesus is like, "Hey, guys, it's me." "Oh, snap. Okay. Jesus, what's up? Jesus gets on the boat with them, then immediately they're at shore. They get out of the boat, and then something amazing happens at the end of chapter 6. Because Jesus, the subheading for this is Jesus heals the sick in Gennesaret. It's not going to be on the screen, but I'm going to read it to you. Just pay attention to what I'm saying. Because when they had crossed over, this is the disciples and Jesus in the boat. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored to the shore. This is where he landed and went and met the demonic man in the tombs, and he set him free. And from there, he goes and meets Jairus, and he goes and meets this woman. You following? Y'all tracking where we're at geographically now? He's back in the same spot that he was in, and this is a few days, maybe a week, 2 weeks later. Because I know the Bible is broken up in Scripture, like chapter and verse, but this isn't all happening like, all right, 1 hour he's here, and then 2 hours later he's in Amarillo, and then over here he's in Lubbock, and then he comes back home. No, this is taking a while for him to get where he's going. He comes back across, and they crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret and moored to the shore. And when they got out of the boat, the people immediately recognized him and ran about the whole region. And they began to bring the sick people on their beds to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he came, in villages, in cities, or in the countryside, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and implored him that they might touch even the hem of his garment. And as many as touched it were made well. I wonder where they heard that. I wonder how they knew that that was a possibility. The third point is eventually her testimony spreads. Wherever he came, in villages, cities, or countryside, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and implored him that they might touch even the fringe or the hem of his garment, and as many as touched it were made well. He has gone to Nazareth, he's gone back across to this desolate place, he's come back across the sea, landed in Gennesaret, and all of these people in Galilee are like, that's Jesus. We recognize him. We know who he is. We know what he looks like. Quick, everybody go. Get the sick people. Bring them out. Lay them in the street. Put them on their beds. Put them in there, on their pallets or whatever, on the street. And all they have to do is touch the hem of his garment because we know the testimony of this woman. She told us what happened to her. Some of them were in the crowd when it happened. Some of them were there when he was meeting with Jairus and going to see his daughter, and this woman stops the procession. Some of them were in that group, and so they're like, we saw it happen. We heard what Jesus said. We know what she's told us. She said she was sick for 12 years, and all she had to do was touch the edge of his garment, and she was made well immediately. So this testimony is spread across the region of Galilee. Everywhere he goes, there's sick people lined up in the streets. And they're like, hey, Jesus, dude, all you got to do, just come through, let them touch your garment, and then just bail, man. We don't even need you to stick around. We just want you to heal our people. And he's like, okay, cool. All I got to do is just come through. Here you go. You're made well, and you're made well, and you get a miracle, and you get a miracle. These people only knew that this was possible because of the testimony of the woman in Mark chapter 5. And she went from the woman with the issue of blood to the woman who has this crazy story of how she used to be sick, and then she reached out and touched the hem of his garment, and she's now made well. This is wild. Point number 4 is our testimony helps us overcome. Our testimony helps us overcome. Revelation chapter 12, verse 11 says, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. In some translations it says, and they have overcome the evil one by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Sometimes we think that it's going to take like some wild, miraculous thing to set us free. Sometimes we think that it's going to, God, you've got to come and you've got to deliver me from this thing. You've got to do this thing for me. You've got to, whatever it is, we think that we need him to work this giant miracle. And he's saying, you've got what you need already. He's already given us the blood of the Lamb, and that was on the cross at Calvary. When Jesus Christ was crucified, His blood spilled out, His blood poured down, and that covered our sins. It didn't cover them, it took our sins away, according to Scripture. And then it says, couple that with your testimony, the words of your testimony, and you'll overcome the evil one. Sometimes we've got to tell our story so that we can remember what happened. Sometimes we've got to tell our story, not for other people, but for our own self. For us to be able to walk in freedom, we have to remember and look back and say, I know what I'm going through right now, but I know what Jesus did for me then. We can hold on to that truth. We can hold on to the Scriptures, and we can hold on to what He's done. And we can say, I understand that because of how good He is, and because of our story together, He can still come through again. Ultimately, when we share our testimony, it's just us telling people about the things that Jesus has done in our lives, about the way He has helped us to overcome our obstacles, and how He's helped us to become victorious in our lives. I'm not going to share an entire message about a testimony and not give you one. November 11th, right? 19 days from today will be the 5-year anniversary of my brother's death. He was 33 years old when he passed away. We don't know really what happened. We don't know how or why he ended up dying, but he did. He died the Monday after Thanksgiving in 2015. It is still the hardest thing I've ever dealt with. It's the worst season that I've ever walked through was the months and the years following that. I'm a changed person. I'm not who I was on November 29th of 2015. I'll never be that man again. But that's okay. I don't have to be that person again because the story changes who we are sometimes. And I'll tell you, if I didn't have God, if I didn't have Jesus, if I didn't have a relationship with the Lord, I may not be here right now. There were days where I wanted to just throw it all away. There were days where I wanted to, just exit stage left on my own terms. But because I had a relationship with God, and I understood who He is, and how big He is, and how strong He is, and that I don't believe it was His will for my brother to die, but I know that He can use that situation and that circumstance, that scenario in my life. And I've led worship, for the last 17 years, 18 years of my life in some way, some form. 6 months or so, I would get up on that platform and I would sing songs, and I would sit down and I would go home and I would wonder what in the world I was doing. Why am I even doing this anymore? I don't even want to be on the platform. I don't want to be leading. I don't want to be singing these songs. I don't want to play this guitar anymore. I just want to sit and I want to, just sit in this darkness. But I continued on. I would preach messages that I didn't believe. I would sing songs that I didn't believe and that I hated at that moment. Every year I would take the students from my youth group to Colorado Springs and we would go to Desperation Conference. And 2015 is the last year that we went. There are multiple mitigating factors as to why we haven't gone back, but the main reason, I was not planning on going. We'll just put it that way. It happened in July of 2015. I was not planning on going to this conference. I didn't want to go. I was like, we were 2 months out, and they were like, hey, we're going to Desperation, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, Desperation Conference. I guess we'll figure it out. We'll plan it. We'll get a hotel. We'll do the thing. I'll drive you guys up there. It'll be fine. Whatever. Yeah, let's do it. One last hurrah. We'll go to Desperation Conference. We got there, and the first day, I was like, whatever. This is great. The second day, though, I finally allowed myself to worship. I finally allowed myself to open my heart and just be like, God, I can't carry this anymore. I cannot walk around with this weight anymore. I cannot handle this brokenness that I feel anymore, and I need you to break in. And He did. And it was insane. It was wild. For 7 months, I walked in just straight up darkness. I didn't want to, I didn't lose friends or anything, but I definitely became recluse and secluded, and I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to interact with anybody. I was doing playing church and doing the motions and going through all the things, and I was not sold out for it. July of 2015, the Lord rescued me out of that pit. And I'm telling you that story right now because I've recently walked through more emotional distress in the last year and a half. And I've looked back on, well, if He delivered me out of that emotional brokenness and that emotional trauma in 2015, then it was technically 2016 at that point, then He can absolutely deliver me from the brokenness and the darkness and the despair that I'm walking through right now. Because I'm remembering what He did for me. And I found pretty much every single youth group that I've gone to over the last 4 years or so, I have told that story because I need y'all to hear it. I need to hear it, and I need to speak it, and I need to talk about it and tell you what the Lord has done for me, but you need to hear it. Because I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what you've struggled through. I don't know the brokenness and the darkness and the tragedy and the stuff that you have had to handle, and there's been a ton of it in 2020. But I need you to know that you can make it as long as you allow the Lord to come in. I need you to know that in my darkest day, in my darkest time, the Lord was still there with me. He never abandoned me. He never left me. He never forsook me. He was always there. And when I was ready for Him to come in, He came in immediately. And He's done it every single day since then. When I've come to the end of myself, and I've said, I know that this man can heal me. If I could just touch the hem of His garment, I'll be made well. Your testimony, plus the blood of the Lamb, is how you overcome the devil. He'll tell you that you're not good enough. He'll tell you that you're stupid. He'll tell you that it's time to end it. He'll tell you that depression is just what you have to deal with, and that, brokenness and anxiety is just what you have to deal with. And you can tell him, listen to me, buddy. I've got the blood of the Lamb. I've got Jesus Christ on my side. And I've got the word of my testimony of telling him how Jesus came through for you and me in our darkest days. He never left you. He never forsook you. He never left you by yourself. He was always, always, always with you. You guys bow your heads as I pray to finish this out, and then we'll go to small groups. Father, I thank you that our words, coupled with your blood, is how we overcome the enemy. And that as we dig into you, as we pour our hearts out to you, then you can come in and you will ultimately set us free of the things that we're dealing with. Lord, I pray that you would grow our faith, that you would grow our faith as we hear other people's testimonies, and that we would be emboldened and encouraged to share our story of who you are, of what you've done in our lives. Lord, we thank you for who you are, what you're doing in us and through us in this city and in this community. We love you. We worship you. In Jesus' name. Amen.